Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming in spite of this inclement weather. Very kind of you. This evening, we'd like to hear from, of course, Martyn Brabbins, our designate Chief Conductor, who's going to take over the orchestra in February next year. But before that, he's coming here for a few test concerts with our orchestra, and I hope you'll all come to the concerts. In the meantime, welcome, Martyn, and I would like you to introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little about yourself.
Good evening. So it's obviously, for me, being invited to become the Chief Conductor of the orchestra is a fantastic honour. And of course, when I was growing up as a young child, it's something that would never even occur to me that I might end up doing what I'm doing. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, I'm one of 5 children, I joined a brass band, which I'm sure probably doesn't exist here in India, but it's a collection of about 25 different brass instruments that makes the most amazing noise. And by joining a brass band, I was given an instrument, I was given tuition, and I joined this amazing community of the band that I was in, and these hundreds and hundreds of brass bands all over the UK, and now very much all over Europe. And if I hadn't joined that brass band, partly because of the economic circumstances of my parents, which was very, very poor, there's no way I would have been able to pursue any kind of musical tuition, because my parents had no money to pay for it. So I owe this incredible debt to my rather ordinary and humble beginnings in the brass band. But as soon as I started in this band, one thing that helped me progress quite quickly and to quite a high level was I was the only other thing that interested me as a child, as a young guy growing up, was sport. So I was very competitive. I was a very fast runner. I didn't play tennis to Khushroo standard, but I did play rugby to quite a high level, which is a very aggressive, fantastic sport that probably doesn't come to India. You're far too sensible to play such a game. But I guess the competitiveness that was in my nature, so running fast and scoring as many tries as I could in rugby, inspired me to practice hard on the instrument I took up was the euphonium, which is the tenor tuba. So it's a small, shrunken version of the big tuba you hear in orchestras. And I progressed very rapidly and to a high level at a very young. I did my grade 8. If any of you know anything about those exams, I think I was about 13 and got really high marks. So it was clearly something in music really began to mean something to me. And I remember very vividly the first time I was moved by music was me singing to myself the tune of Edelweiss from The Sound of Music. And I remember it, just that rising seventh at the beginning there, it just touched me so beautifully. So music by chance came into my life, and as you can imagine, I've been so grateful, because it's led to an extraordinary existence. When I left school, I went off to university in London, where I met my wife, who in 1977, you'll be happy to know she's still my wife.
Unusual.
And I poor her is all I can say, because she spent so since I became a conductor, I've spent more time away from home than at home, by quite a considerable degree, I would imagine. But Karen, my wife Karen, was a violinist, and of course I was a brass player, and she really helped I suppose, educate me in a way. I did a music degree, of course, but Karen and I, when we were students, we would go to concerts in London and operette performances 2 or 3 times a week. And that's where I was really inspired to pursue what I now do. As a younger, late teenager, I had an idea that conducting might be of interest to me. But it was only when I went to see, I was just in Khushroo's office there and seeing this photo of Scholti, George Scholti. I saw him conduct many times in the festival hall. Carlo Maria Giulini, Wolfgang Sawallisch, Claudio Bardo, Riccardo Muti, all these people would appear in London regularly. And I would sit behind the orchestra in the choir seats, usually behind the trombones, because trombone was my next instrument after I left school. And I would observe these conductors with microscopic interest. And I guess that's what inspired me as much as anything else to pursue this wonderful art form which I try to practice. So in my mid-20s, I was playing trombone professionally, I was teaching brass, I was composing a little bit, and I did a little bit of amateur conducting. And people would tell me that I was quite good, and maybe I should take the conducting more seriously. So what then happened, I applied for a scholarship from the British Council to go and study conducting in the Soviet Union. So this was in 1986, in the good old days of communism. And I was granted the scholarship and spent an amazing year in Leningrad, as it was then, St. Petersburg now, studying with Ilya Alexandrovich Musin, most extraordinary teacher, probably one of the great conducting teachers of the past century. And during my first year, things went well, and a conductor's name you may know, Valery Gergiev, was also a student of Musin. He was already working at the Kirov Theatre, now the Mariinsky. Valery invited me to assist him on a production of Mozart Don Giovanni. So I needed to get another year of scholarship from the British Council, which I managed to do, which was extraordinary. So I then spent a second year in the Soviet Union, in Leningrad, some of which time was spent assisting at the Kirov, and I also did concerts around the place. And then at the end of my time in Russia, I applied to a conducting competition, which is one of the best ways to get a kickstart in your activities, your career. And I won the prize. I won the first prize, and that was just a week or so after I came back from Russia. So it couldn't have been better timing. And actually, that's no surprise. Conductors, one of the things we do well, we hope, is timing. Tempo, rehearsal time. So yes, and that's sort of what started me.
You also met Marat there, I believe.
I met Marat in the year after I won the competition. So I won the competition in 88, and in 1989 I went back to Russia to do some concerts, some of which were in Almaty, which was then the capital of Kazakhstan, where Marat hails from. A friend of his, an English friend of his, was a pianist who studied in Moscow with Marat. I got to know him. He invited me to do these concerts, and that's where I met Marat and his family. I remember vividly drinking tea with Marat's mother and father, and Marat's father playing the dombra, which is a two-stringed instrument, extraordinarily well. I mean, what he could get out of 2 strings was almost miraculous, just like Marat can do with 4 strings. But it was obviously a very musical family that Marat was a part of. Siblings, nephews, nieces, they were all extraordinarily musical. But the other vivid memory was playing football. We all played football on the field outside his family home. And yes, so full circle now. I'm doing Tchaikovsky again with Marat in a week's time here in India. So it's rather an extraordinary link, isn't it? This English guy met a Kazakh violinist, and now we're working together here in India. So, but that's the world of music, I guess. There's lots of circles and connections that we all make as we travel around and as time moves forward.
Do you recall any memorable moments when you were in Russia, performances, artists, and at the Bolshoi or whatever that you remember, Martyn?
I do. My first real conducting experience, I would say, which I still remember, it was May the 14th, 1987, was I conducted Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony with the sort of orchestra that was for the conducting faculty. And that was a life-changing moment. I managed to conduct the whole thing from memory, and it went extremely well. So it was one of those, you think life progresses in a nice, gentle curve. It doesn't, especially when you're trying to do something like conducting or any kind of musical thing to a high level. So you're going along, and then suddenly you jump up a level, and then you're going along, you're struggling, and then you jump up another level. That moment made a really massive leap for me. The other, of course, unforgettable musician that I encountered, apart from my teacher, was Yevgeny Mravinsky, who conducted the Leningrad Philharmonic for, I think, nigh on 50 years, premiered many of Shostakovich's works, and got that orchestra to an extraordinarily high level of achievement. But I was very fortunate to hear his last two concerts with the Leningrad Philharmonic. One of them was all Wagner excerpts, and the other one was the Schubert the Unfinished Symphony and Brahms' Fourth Symphony. And they were electric. The atmosphere was electric. People knew he was ailing and aged, and the reverence, it was like a godlike figure. And both concerts ended with just him on stage for at least 20 minutes with the audience applauding on their feet. So that was a kind of a watershed moment when he died. It was the end of a very special era, and being there was quite something. I remember Zubin coming to Leningrad with the New York Philharmonic, and I think they did Mahler 9, and I remember being there. But what I perhaps remember more than that was the black limousine and the sunglasses of him and his wife, and him being treated as though he was a film star.
Yes,
which I guess you treat him the same way. Yeah.
Martyn, we heard Mravinsky in Vienna in '56 when he came during the Mozart bicentenary. Wow. All the orchestras of the world were there. It was the Concertgebouw and the Vienna Philharmonic. Everybody was there. And he played the Shostakovich violin concerto with Oistrakh.
Wow.
And then he did the Fifth and Sixth Symphony of Tchaikovsky. And among all those great orchestras, people were quite amazed. And I spoke to members of the Vienna Philharmonic who said, my God, these people can play Tchaikovsky. And I remember in the Ars movement, the violins put their things up and played the final theme. It's quite magical, really.
Yes.
It's a special sound.
There's something about the Russian violin school which creates this extraordinary depth of sound. in the orchestras. And I remember what struck me when I went there in 1986, having come from London and hearing all these refined London orchestras, beautifully balanced, homogeneous sound. Wind soloists would be soloists, but the brass sections would blend like the best chocolate. It was so smooth. And when I went to Leningrad, all the brass instruments used vibrato, which was just unheard of in the West. And I remember being in absolute shock and horror when I heard this. But after a fairly short time, one gets used to the sound and realizes that the combination of these vibrations is partly what creates the rich overtones of sound. And it's the same with the incredible vibrato that they have in the left hand on all the string players. Sadly, some of that individuality of sound of those orchestras from Russia and from other Eastern European countries has disappeared, largely because of the taste of the record-buying public, I imagine. But it's something that it's unfortunate that it's disappeared.
The individual sounds of orchestra have disappeared. They're all international.
Yeah.
Except, of course, except us, the Vienna Philharmonic. They are special, to themselves at least.
I travel the world and hear different orchestras, and they are very similar in sounds, but each orchestra somehow does have a distinct personality. So in the UK, I've worked for 33 or 34 years with the BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra, who came here 15 years, some time ago. And although from the time I started with them, which was probably in 1992 or something, to now, I think there maybe is 1 or 2 players remaining in the orchestra, but they still sound
different.
They sound similar to how they sounded 30 years ago.
Yeah. Yes.
And the orchestra somehow managed, when people leave an orchestra and new people come in, there's always an overlap of personnel, and the new people come in, they get appointed because they kind of suit the style of the orchestra, and then they adopt the style of the orchestra. So the BBC Scottish remains distinct to the BBC Symphony Orchestra, which remains distinct to the BBC Philharmonic. And this is something I find really interesting, how an orchestra can retain its personality, even though over a period of 20, 30 years, the personnel almost completely changes. And I guess that's what keeps the Vienna Philharmonic
going, yes.
Staying in its own special sound world, and the Berlin Philharmonic and the Concertgebouw Orchestra. So we can lament the changes maybe, but also I do think the standard of orchestra playing generally in the world is
up, yes.
Always getting stronger and higher.
I wonder whether you've heard the Boston Symphony in their hall.
Unfortunately not.
Oh, but that's a glorious sound. And Seiji Ozawa, who's their conductor for many years, he told me, he says, we very carefully choose our players. And one of the violinists who auditioned for them was very good indeed. But I voted against him because he doesn't fit the sound of the strings of the Boston. He was too good for them.
And
he was more a virtuoso, etc.
Yes, being a virtuoso is all well and good, but it's not what's needed, in an orchestra. An orchestra, you have to be able to be part of a team, and and then within the big team, there are many separate individual teams. If you think of each section of the orchestra has to have a cohesive sound and a cohesive approach, and it does happen that dare I say, I was talking to Andrew yesterday at dinner, Andrew Litton, who conducted, and he said he regrets one appointment that he's made with his orchestra that he works now, because he thought the person was going to fit well, but sadly didn't. So it is obvious if a player doesn't fit, and then there are, then there's a challenge of either making the player fit or finding an exit, perhaps for a player.
What I was saying is that many orchestras came to India, many, including Karan, who played at the Xavier's Hall. And Zubin was in conversation with Karan quite a lot, because when we tried to go to one of his rehearsals in 56, he says, ausgestellt, out of question, out. There was no question of going to his rehearsal. But later on, he went on and on about the cohesiveness of the Berlin Philharmonic, what sort of sound he wanted, until it became a little bit of an obsession. That's what I hear. And when he went to the Metropolitan and he demanded 5 rehearsals, which Metropolitan never gave, but he got it. And he had this cast, Nielsen, I think Hotter, Wiengassen, great Wagner cast, and he was doing his black lighting. First rehearsal was only black lighting, with this great cast waiting. Second was the same. And Nielsen, she was mischievous. She bought a miner's length, and she came out and said, anybody here? And he sent her back. It's a famous case, yeah.
This, I mean, what you kind of bring up by talking about a story like that is the kind of way that conductors behaved then, which is completely unacceptable now. There are one does still hear stories of perhaps conductors taking their authority a little bit too far and treating musicians in a bad, disrespectful way, and I find that completely against my ethos.
Yes.
Entirely. Partly, I guess, because I did spend 5 years playing in orchestras in London, and feel that in the fact that I'm a conductor is wonderful, but it's kind of just lucky chance. I could still be a trombone player. And therefore I do have this phenomenal respect for what orchestral players deliver, because that it's no easy task that they have, and they have to maintain the quality of playing, and they have to prepare every piece they're working on. They have to listen to this potential idiot conductor at the front telling them what to do. They all have their own musical ideas, they all have their own individual musicianship, and they have to kind of repress so much. So that, to me, is something that I have to respect, and the kind of dictatorial approach that maybe Karajan, maybe others, I mean, even more recently, others have behaved in
what would have happened to a Toscanini today?
He would have had to alter.
Adjust.
Yeah. I mean, maybe, conductor is a leader. A conductor does have to wield certain amount of authority, but it's like any. I mean, I don't see you as a dictatorial leader of the NCPA,
No.
but there could have been such a person, and that person may have succeeded, maybe not. But I think now there are many different ways of leading. My ideal leader is someone who leads by example, which is why I also am grateful for the conducting technique that my wonderful teacher Ilya Musin gave me in those 2 years that I studied in Leningrad, because then when I stand up and move, generally speaking, I'm sure some members of the orchestra are here. Generally speaking, orchestras understand what I'm doing. I hope. I'm not hearing any murmurs yet, but because you could just picture yourself, standing in front of 80, 90 wonderful musicians. You make a false move, and you're the orchestra are there at your mercy, and that's not a very nice thing to do. So, yeah, I try and lead by example and treat musicians respectfully until they need a good telling off.
Do you remember any memorable concerts at the Festival Hall during your stay in London? You heard all these great conductors all over the place.
Yeah, I remember. I don't know if I remember much about the programs, but I do remember being incredibly enthralled by Giulini, who conducted. He had this wonderful, incredible look about him, and conveyed utter control over the orchestra. But again, it felt like a very nice way of doing it. Sawallisch also, I remember him doing the Brahms violin concerto with Nathan Milstein.
Oh, beautiful.
Which was just extraordinary.
Yeah.
Muti I wasn't so excited by. There was just something that rather aggressive that emanated from him. Whereas Abbado, and the other wonderful Italian, had a very, very different spirit. Also, of course, there was one of your favourite English conductors, Sir Colin Davis, who I'd go and watch whenever I could. I became not a friend of his but towards the end of his life, but I had good contact with him. I have a hobby, which I rarely tell people about, but I'll tell you. I make tapestries. So my mother taught me when I was a child to knit. You know what knitting is? Yeah? And for some reason, I took up tapestry making, inspired by my sisters who did it. And when I met Sir Colin, we shared this hobby.
He did it all.
He also knitted and made tapestries. So I've got a tapestry with me here in India. So when I go back and I'm alone in my hotel room, I do spend a lot of time studying. I have a whole load of scores with me for projects, but I also relax with my tapestry. And I love to do it. I sometimes follow in a kit, but more interesting for me, I make up my own designs. And they're available to you to buy for several £1,000s. No, they're not. They're completely for my own enjoyment.
I've been going to London since the 1950s, and the Philharmonia was formed, as you know, with the help of the Maharaja of Mysore, who agreed to give them £10,000 a year, but unfortunately was stopped by the Indian government when the Foreign Exchange Act came in. And it was Walter Legge who was holding them. And then he gathered these incredibly talented people. And the Philharmonia of those days, I was young, of course, they did a Verdi Requiem with Cantelli, with Schwarzkopf, Ebestignani, Tagliavini, and Modesti. And the sound of that orchestra in the tuba mirum sent shivers down the spine. And I said I was young, so perhaps I was influenced. But I asked several players from the Philharmonia who had survived up to 1970 or so. He says, what was one of the best concerts you played in? And they said, that was it. Cantelli was the conductor that they really admired. He died in an air crash.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the Philharmonia. Of the big London orchestras,
yes,
that's the one I've conducted the most.
Yeah.
And it's
extraordinary.
An amazing privilege and treat. I recently did a concert with them, and they retain an extraordinary sound quality. And I mean, you mentioned virtuosity. They are all orchestrally
great players.
Yeah, virtuosic. And the Tchaikovsky 6 we did, I mean, it was, for me anyway, it was a very special event. We're very lucky in London because the Philharmonia are world class. The London Symphony Orchestra always ranked up there with the top orchestras. The London Philharmonic also are a superb orchestra. And then we have the BBC Symphony Orchestra, which is particularly strong in rather extravagantly avant-garde and new repertoire. I just did a whole concert of Pierre Boulez with them, which was a real intellectual tussle. But they, in the end, played it as though it were Mozart. And that's the best way to approach this difficult new music. And of course, the opera orchestras in London are very fine.
Extraordinary. You know, Pierre Boulez did The Ring in Bayreuth, and that is on video. How do you feel his approach matched the German Wacht?
Well, it's a recording I haven't listened to for a while, but I imagine it probably there was a little bit of dissonance. Wagner is one of my great loves, and if anyone ever asks me what my ambitions are, it would be I did 2 of the Ring operas in my time at English National Opera. We planned to do a whole cycle, and we managed to do Rheingold and Walküre, but then I had to leave the company because of the way the government and the Arts Council were cutting the musicians, both their salaries and the number of players. So I resigned in protest. So I hope that Ring cycle continues, because the Rheingold was extraordinarily successful. Walküre slightly less so, but I think the rest of what was planned in Richard Jones's vision would have been a wonderful thing to do. Boulez, to me, I don't want to be rude, but he doesn't feel like a romantic repertoire conductor. It's a very, very kind of intellectual approach.
Clear Wagner, very
clear,
lucid.
I agree.
But
very
not
clear.
Flesh. No flesh.
No flesh. And everybody needs flesh.
Especially Wagner.
Yeah.
You must have played with hundreds of soloists, violinists, pianists, etc. Do any of them sort of stand out in your estimation?
I remember very early in my time conducting with Kyung Hwa Chung, the wonderful Korean violinist. She was such a presence, so extraordinary. Of my recent vocal heroes and heroines, about 15 years ago, I suppose, I was asked to do an opera in Frankfurt. It was called Murder in the Cathedral by Pizzetti, based on the T.S. Eliot play. And it was a piece I didn't know, but I was tempted. Obviously, Frankfurt Opera is a wonderful company. I got to know the score, and the real clincher was that Sir John Tomlinson, one of the great Votans in the Barenboim Ring at Bayreuth, was to be the Archbishop of Canterbury in the opera. And Sir John and I spent 6 weeks rehearsing together and became extremely good friends, which we remain very good friends. And, you know, one thinks of great singers as having a great voice. Of course they have a great voice. They have to have a great voice. It's obvious. But also, these people have an extraordinary work ethic. And I've never known anyone work as hard as I saw John in that. He never once marked. Marking, when you're a singer, marking means you sing half voice. So in rehearsal he would always sing 100% plus. And by so doing, he was training himself into the role and training his voice to deliver what he delivered in a way that nobody else could match. And I found that completely inspiring. A little while later, I was doing my first Valkura in a festival in the UK. And I'd learnt it largely, of course, I'd learnt the score, but I also listened to the Barenboim recording. And we were doing 4 performances, I think. And during the second performance, our Wotan basically lost his voice.
Oh.
So in the second interval, after Act 2, I rang Sir John, and said, we've got a bit of a problem here. Are you free on Friday? And he said he was free. And I said, well, we have this situation. Might you be able to fly down and help us out? So when I called him, he was singing through with his accompanist, Bluebeard's Castle, the Bartok. He was having a coaching on this. So he was hard at work. And he said, well, I'll finish what I'm doing. I'll sing through the role of Wotan and call you back. And sure enough, at about midnight, having sung his coaching, then sung through the whole role of Wotan, which he hadn't sung for some 10 years probably, he said, yes, I'll come and do it. And he flew down and we did Valkyrie we had half an hour rehearsal. And it was, stories like that, it's just inspirational. Yes. And the other singer I ought to mention who's, I find, an amazing artist, and you will have the pleasure of meeting her at some point in the not too distant future, is Dame Sarah Connolly, a wonderful mezzo-soprano. We're blessed with many mezzo-sopranos in the UK at the moment, but Sarah perhaps is one of the greats, and again, a phenomenally hard-working, diligent, serious musician who then moves you to tears by her magical artistry. So yes, there are many incredible people one meets along the way.
There's this story of the young trumpet player who was auditioning for, I think it was Riccardo Butti. And he said he looked too young, and so Mutti said, play the beginning of Also sprach. So he played it. He said, again, 5 times. And then the young chap got up and said, Maestro, don't waste your time. I won't get it wrong. And he was engaged.
Yeah. I mean, that's... Yeah, you think, trumpet players, they play the trumpet, but playing the trumpet perfectly under pressure, playing any instrument perfectly under pressure is part of what orchestral players have to learn. You know, that and many other, the beginning of Mahler 5, which many of you heard the other day.
He was wonderful.
And you can imagine if that beginning doesn't go well, the whole performance.
Yes.
I have been at one performance where the trumpet player really didn't have a good beginning of that. I wasn't conducting, thank goodness, but and the whole piece, it never really recovered. And one thing I quite like, for instance, if I'm conducting a long opera, I like something to go wrong quite early in the performance. Nothing too major, of course, but just a little problem, because then everybody, their attention goes up a little notch, and from then on, usually things settle down. So, yeah, mistakes can be useful, but also in the case of that Mahler 5 opening, it can really affect everybody's psychology, because they know that the trumpet player is really important in every part of that piece, apart from the wonderful adagietto, of course. So yeah, I go back to what I was saying a few minutes ago about the respect I have for orchestral musicians, simply because they have to do something rather extraordinary every time they pick up their instrument, and I think we should all remember that.
Of course. What did you think of the Philadelphia? Did you ever hear them with Stokowski or with Ormandy?
Only I may be old.
I'm not that much.
I'm not that. You might be that old, but I've heard them on record, of course, and they're extraordinary beasts. I mean, the orchestra, I've done very little in the US, but when was it? Just before COVID, I guess, probably 2019. I had a call from the San Francisco Symphony, which was quite exciting, but it was very sad because it was the time Michael Tilson Thomas had to have some brain surgery. So I'm very grateful that he had the brain surgery, because I was able to go and I replaced him on a few performances of L'Enfant les Sortilèges, this wonderful opera by Ravel, and it was an extraordinary.
They're a very good
experience.
orchestra.
They're a very good orchestra. They have incredible conditions and a wonderful public, extraordinarily generous, and it was just a great privilege to go and spend some time in that city.
You know, a lot of soloists who I've spoken to, conductors, etc., I asked them what their favorite orchestras, not favorite, but profoundly musical orchestras were. And there were an amazing amount who said that the Czech Philharmonic was hard to beat.
Well, people say that. I've never conducted them.
Yeah.
I'm going to the Czech Republic quite soon to conduct an orchestra, but not that one, sadly.
They came here, you know, under, who was it? I don't remember. But they were very good. Played in an Eros cinema, which was not a very good acoustic. But
musicianship and orchestras, they're all extraordinarily musical, of course. It largely depends on what they're inspired to give by the conductor, I guess.
Yes.
Although an orchestra like the Czech Philharmonic will play Dvorak like nobody else, I'm sure.
But Schell was a little bit of a rough chap, wasn't he?
I'm sure.
And a young pianist who's famous now, I won't name him, was sent there to audition for him because he wanted to play it. And Schell was in the kitchen. And he said, yes, what do you want? He said, I've been sent by so-and-so, and I want to play for you. He said, all right, play. Where? He says, on the kitchen table. So he played. And he said, all right, now come to the hall tomorrow. He went to the hall. He sat down, he played and said, no, stick to the kitchen table. Famous story over there.
Oh, that's very unkind, isn't it?
He is very unkind, I'm told.
Yes, I'm sure. I mean,
like Mr. Klemperer.
But the thing about, I talk about orchestral players being under pressure. When they audition, they're under even more pressure, because it's like an exam. You're there on your own, and you're being judged, purely judged. You're not just contributing to a performance like musicians in an orchestra are. So auditions are very, very unkind. And when I was music director at English National Opera, we always used to try very hard to make the auditionees feel at their ease, because it can be a really, if someone has a bad day, it can really be, not only will they not get the job, it will affect them for many, many weeks thereafter, because when you're a performer, it's not something that is a separate part of your being. You are a performer, and if your performing is under par and you feel you're not delivering, you feel you're less worthy as a human being, if that makes sense. I mean, maybe for any performers in the hall, they might understand that. Maybe if you aren't a performer, you perhaps don't appreciate that. But it is what I am. It is who I am, partly, being a performer, being a conductor. I mean, when I go home after a trip away, I have to readjust to just being dad, or my husband and my wife, or the person that walks the dog. All of those things which I love doing, and cooking, which I also enjoy doing massively. But I don't think it's something adjusting back into normal, reality, ordinary life. Yes. Takes some time.
You know, performances here have been quite voluminous. When I see the amount of performances we've had, have been large. But when you came here last was about a few years ago, wasn't it?
I came and we did the Saint-Saëns Organ Symphony.
That was recently, but did you come once before?
I came at least twice before.
Twice, yes. Do you feel that there's any difference in the orchestra?
Oh yeah, the orchestra improves each time.
Has improved.
Yeah.
That's good to hear.
And the whole, things evolve. Some of the players remain the same. Some have changed, like I mentioned earlier. But on general standard, things are going in the right direction, and that's what Marat and I and you and you all want, and also the orchestra wants. They want to do their best and be their best all the time.
You're a great opera conductor, and we haven't had opera for 3 or 4 years now. And Ganzaroli, who has done all 7 operas for us, wants to do opera again. What do you think would suit our orchestra, etc.? Zubin said, do Salome.
I said do Salome as well.
Sir. Yes.
I mean, that was one of my first operas at English National Opera. And it may not be, name me a great opera that doesn't end badly. All the great operas are tragedies. And Salome is no difference. But what's so amazing about that score, apart from the role of Salome and John the Baptist and so on, which are extraordinary roles, but the orchestra writing is better than anything. I mean, I'm a great Wagner fan also, not only because of the drama and the singing, but what goes on in the pit is just second to none. It's some of the greatest orchestral music. Yes. And it's the same with Salome. I mean, there are other pieces that one could always consider, but I think that would be a useful, a good one.
That's right, yes.
I don't know what the audience think. You think so? Good.
Well, in Russia, I asked somebody, I says, what's the difference between a tragedy and a comedy in Russia? He said, when in a tragedy, everybody dies at the end. In the comedy, everybody dies in the end, but they die happy. Yeah, that was the difference in Russia. Yes.
Are we going to have some questions from the floor?
Please.
Does anybody have any questions? I've already said to this gentleman, no difficult questions. So,
you mentioned that you spent many years with a single orchestra, and one understands how leadership grows in that situation. But you also have occasion when you go and lead an orchestra just for a short time. How do you manage to set up rapport in that situation?
So did everyone hear that question?
Yes.
Yeah? No? So the question was how to connect to an orchestra on an initial short meeting. And well, again, I go back to one of the things that's absolutely essential in that kind of situation is, and it happened to me very recently with a performance of Mahler 5, which I was asked to do with 1 day's notice. And I did know the orchestra, but I hadn't rehearsed. So it was a very quick acquaintanceship with me and them and the piece. But generally what helps, I find, is being a reasonable human being. That's is always useful, isn't it? And the other thing, which again I go back to my conducting technique, which Musin helped me acquire, and over the years I hope has become more and more communicative. Without clear technique and clear idea about a piece, you will not connect well. So that's my ultimate watchword. Be prepared. So spend time learning music, massive amount of time learning music. And when one is given the orchestra or whatever the situation one goes into, treat it with respect and grace, but strong leadership, committed leadership. And it doesn't always work. No, I'm lucky. I generally get invited back to places, but occasionally it doesn't work for whatever reason, and that's absolutely fine, because I don't want to work with musicians that don't want to work with me, and vice versa. So, yeah. I mean, the thing about looking at the other thing you mentioned, which was having a long relationship with orchestras. I have many long relationships with orchestras in the UK and some in Europe. And for me, the most rewarding music making generally is with an orchestra that I've got a long relationship with, because they understand me, I understand them, and it doesn't necessarily make things easier, but it makes things richer and deeper, and one can just achieve more in that scenario where you've kind of grown up together. So that's very, very rewarding to me. There's a question there.
Firstly, welcome back to India on behalf of all the SOI members. Simple question: which is your favorite composer and your favorite opera?
You know, I can't answer questions like that.
That's why I said it's very simple.
I know, but the answer is really very complicated. Because
You're 10 most and 10 most.
Yeah.
That's easier.
But I mean, at the moment, I'm very fond of Rimsky-Korsakov, Scheherazade and Shostakovich 5, because they are right ahead of me. But I mean, Shostakovich is one of my favorite composers, as is Wagner, as is Stravinsky. And that covers opera and orchestra. I really find choosing a favorite anything really, really difficult. You know, I've got 3 children. They're all my favorites.
Yeah.
And I have 1 wife. That's the easy one. But yeah, I have to, as a conductor, I remember someone asking a famous conductor, what's your favorite Brahms symphony? And the one I'm conducting at the moment is the answer. And I think not being flippant about it, one does have to commit one's whole being to whatever you're doing at that moment as a conductor.
Another complicated follow-on. Which is your favorite concert hall?
This is all?
Which favorite concert hall? Well, I would say possibly I would get close to a favorite. It would be the Suntory Hall in Tokyo.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's a great hall. The sound in that hall is amazing, and I don't know if you've ever experienced classical music concert in Japan.
Yes.
But the audiences there are extraordinary. They're totally silent, totally focused, and then they go completely berserk when the thing ends. So they have a wonderful. It's great. I had an orchestra in Nagoya in Japan for 5 years, so I've been a regular visitor. And the other extraordinary thing about Japanese orchestras and public. At the end of any concert, you finish the concert, you get changed and you go out, and there will be a queue of autograph hunters.
Yeah.
And it's all part of the deal. There's a table set up, they have pens, they have everything there, and in they come. Like this gentleman here, some people come with a whole 10 CDs that they want me to sign. And it's something very, very special, very special.
Yeah,
but I guess another great hall would be the Concertgebouw in Amsterdam, which I absolutely love. And
the Muziekverein, sir?
The Muziekverein is, I've only conducted there a couple of times. It's not bad. It's too gold for me. It's too much gold.
The sound.
But the sound is good. And the very special hall in England, in London, is of course the Royal Albert Hall, which is far too big. You know, it seats 5,000 or so. I remember going to hear the Cleveland Orchestra there when I was a student, and was so depressed because it was so quiet. It never really hits you because it's such a big space. But for me, I've done about 40, 50 proms now over the last 30 years. But I have one very special one. So in 2019, I turned 60 on August the 13th. So it was my birthday just a few days ago.
Cool.
And the BBC proms, well, I think my agent said I should come up with something suitable to celebrate my birthday. And that's not really my way, because it's not for me to do, but I did come up with an idea. So I've done a lot of new music and I've done a lot of English music. So I thought, combine those two. And I asked the BBC whether they would commission a new set of Enigma variations. So 14 composers. So I chose the 14 composers. I chose the composer for the theme, and that's very few people know who that is. But then there were a whole set of variations. And the BBC commissioned this idea, and we performed it on my 60th birthday in the Royal Albert Hall with Enigma Variations as the last piece in the concert. And we did the Brahms Schicksalslied with the chorus from English National Opera, and we did Vaughan Williams' Serenade to Music as the opening piece, again with the chorus from E&O. So my birthday, we had 5,000 guests in the concert. It was a sellout concert. So the Royal Albert Hall.
We have 4 years to beat that.
Yeah, we have. So the Royal Albert Hall remains
Yes.
a very special venue for me.
Yes, and especially when last night at the proms was absolutely wonderful.
Yes, exactly.
They phoned us, you know. We're talking to each other.
I
now.
know.
Yes.
I'm part of the phone call.
Well, phone call. Yeah. Where do we put them?
Say again.
In the US, you don't
I don't go there very often. They don't like me for some reason.
Who?
The American orchestras. I've had so very few invitations, which I don't want to get into politics, but I'm quite happy not to go there. I mean, I was talking to Xerxes, who used to work at the Kennedy Center, and the Kennedy Center is being, Mr. Trump's taking it, he's destroying it. So I'm happy to come to India, go to Japan, I'm going to Australia quite soon, and Europe, of course. So I travel east rather than west.
Well, if you go to the Kennedy Center, it'll have to be America first.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Can I ask you something?
You can.
When you have a guest conductor and a celebrity guest conductor, and all the tickets are sold out and people are waiting in line, and it's only to see the conductor. In actuality, you have to give me an answer other than both, because both's not the answer I'm looking for. Who's really adjusting those 90 musicians to the guest conductor whom everyone's coming to see and everyone's applauding, or it's that conductor who's adjusting his style for the orchestra to sound its best on that day? Because as you say, there's very little synchronicity between a celebrity who comes down, he's heard recordings, yes, he's trained his nerve, but he's rehearsed very little before the day of the performance.
But the conductor can make an enormous impact.
So you would say that
the conductor is the most important. Of course I would say that. No, but I do honestly believe that you'd be surprised. So the Philharmonia concert I did just 2 months ago, I had 1 3-hour rehearsal, and still there was never a problem. Orchestras are very clever. They're really, their sense of what the conductor is doing, the slightest change in gesture, even though you think they're watching the music and they're concentrating on their music and their parts, they still sense what's happening in front of them. So a conductor who can make a difference, when you say celebrity conductor, I hope you don't just mean a celebrity, but someone who can really conduct. They can make a massive...
Of course they can, but according to what you said and common sense, the synchronicity between someone who constantly practices and might not be such a big name, they may have a better symbiosis with a specific orchestra than somebody who just comes in.
Well, it depends how good...
I guess that's the talent of the person.
It depends how good they are, yeah. And no orchestra works with one conductor.
So they adjust to different...
Of course, maybe, have you played in an orchestra?
I performed, but always as a soloist,
Yeah.
a pianist.
So, I mean, orchestras, they can really sense this, the magic of conducting. The mystery, has to be something mysterious about it. But you can then really connect and make a massive difference. Otherwise, why bother having a conductor? Of course, there was one orchestra founded in the 1920s in the Soviet Union. It was called the Pervy Symphonicheski Ensemble, the Persymphans. It was the first symphonic ensemble. So the first orchestra not to have a conductor. Of course, democracy, which, that's what communism's all about, isn't it, after all? And they existed for 2 or 3 years.
But did they manage well?
No, they was a complete disaster, of course. They had to rehearse for hours and hours and hours, and people would say this and people would say that, and of course it folded after a few years. But yeah, so conductors, I mean, some orchestral musicians resent conductors, resent some conductors, some resent all conductors, I'm sure. But they can have a real massive impact on both the experience for the audience and the experience for the musicians. So,
what motivated you to conduct an orchestra?
Money. I don't really know. I mean, so I told you about my childhood beginnings in the brass band. When I was in my early teens, we had a wonderful, what seemed to me a really old, wise conductor in the brass band. Some of his things that he said back then stay with me. And I think he was partly the inspiration. We also had a massive record collection at home. We had 2 records. We had Carl Böhm conducting Schubert Unfinished and what was the other one? 5, Schubert 5 and the Unfinished. And we had the Requiem of Verdi, conducted by Karajan. Oh. And I listened to these quite a lot. And I would actually, the typical thing, stand in my bedroom and conduct. So I think there was just perhaps something influenced me, this wonderful... It's the best form of music making because it embraces everything. And of course, if you do opera, it's even a wider embrace because you have lighting, you have costume, you have props, you have stage management, you have all the elements, apart from the music, that you have to kind of bring together. So it's not about power or control, it's just about just the sheer inspiration of trying to make everything work. It's like cooking a good biryani.
Tell me, Martyn, there are so many stick techniques, etc. Mr. Gergiev has one this small, so-and-so has a very long one. But a lot of conducting, I'm told, has been done with the eyes. Equally important. The cues you give with your eyes, etc. Now, Karan conducted with his eyes closed. How do you think that worked? And they asked him that question. And he said, I could follow my orchestra, but not others. Is that right? Do you think you can conduct with your eyes closed?
Yeah,
you
sure.
can.
Oh, yeah.
How important are they?
I'll show you one.
Yeah, but how important are they to?
I don't think it's just eyes. It's a whole. It's the whole physical embracing. Yeah, and I mean, of course, gestures. Of course, the quality of. I would prefer it to be the quality of one's gesture that kind of influences what people do. And going back to what I said to this lady over here, one can hugely influence the sound of an orchestra by the quality of one's gesture. If I had an orchestra here, I could demonstrate to you, but sadly I don't.
You know, you had Klemperer when he was conducting the Eroica at the end. He just raised this thing. The most marvelous sound came out of the orchestra. Was it rehearsal? Or was it just some magnetism of the man?
Yeah, it was the latter. It wasn't rehearsal, of course.
It was being done.
I mean, there's a famous story about the Berlin Philharmonic. I'm not sure who was conducting them, but it wasn't Furtwängler. So Furtwängler had finished his time as chief conductor, but he appeared at the back of the hall. And the sound of the orchestra changed completely. And the conductor stopped and was kind of bewildered, and then looked round and saw that Furtwängler had come into the room.
Carl Böhm was conducting.
Yeah, was it? Well, he was a nasty piece of work as well.
Indeed.
Well, you see clips on YouTube of the way these guys talk to orchestras, and it's just unbelievable.
But he was a marvelous Strauss conductor.
Yes. That's enough, isn't it? You can be a real horrible man as long as you can conduct Strauss. That's discuss.
Some conductors are very calm and some jump around. So why is that?
Personality. And I would imagine, so in Shostakovich 5, I'll be quite calm in the slow music because it's calm. But one's gestures should reflect the music. But of course, each individual's personality will then affect how they affect the music.
Maestro.
Yes, Doctor.
Conducting with the eyes closed, I don't think would work in an opera. Would you agree with me?
I wouldn't advise it.
So it won't work. It won't work in opera.
I'm sure for some, maybe Karajan even there did that. When I conducted opera, I always followed whoever was singing on stage. I would be in contact with them. And generally I would be singing along.
No, sorry, Kavath, he did say, I don't conduct opera with my eyes closed. He did say that, yes. But the orchestra he did sometimes.
Oh, he did, a lot, yeah. Yes?
How do you handle the competition in your field as conductor?
The which?
How do you handle the competition in your field as a conductor? There are many conductors. How do you handle it?
I didn't understand the question.
How do you handle the competition in your field?
Oh, competition.
Competition in what?
Amongst the fellow conductors. How do you handle that?
No competition with Martyn. Quite simple.
I don't think about it.
Yes.
I guess I'm in the fortunate position to be conducting. If I were a 65-year-old conductor who wasn't busy enough, I might handle it differently. And I teach conducting now, and I know there are so many young conductors.
Yeah.
So many. It's just hundreds and hundreds shooting like buds on a tree, you know, and they all want to be doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, you
No
see
chance.
YouTube and the number of people that are in the orchestras,
Yeah.
and they're all multinational, you know, Chinese, Koreans, all kinds of people in every orchestra.
Yes, absolutely.
With due respect to our principal flute player who just lost his dad and flew back last night, he's also a conductor. I mean, he does conducting for his small orchestra.
Well, that's fine. I mean, you know, I always say to my students, if you are only aiming to conduct the Berlin Philharmonic, you will probably end up being frustrated. If you just let things happen, work hard, take every opportunity that comes your way, get experience, listen to what I'm telling you, and, you know, study hard, then you'll find your way, you'll find your place in the ecosystem. But having too much ambition is terribly dangerous. And that's why I never had any ambition. Of course, when I did the Leeds conducting competition, of course I wanted to win. But I was lucky, I did. But I did a competition in Japan and I didn't do so well. And that's very disheartening. But one has to then accept where you end up and make the most of that. And of course, I know a lot of young careers that went wrong, careers that maybe had too much too soon. And that, if you then can't sustain that level, you kind of drift downwards, and that must be really, really depressing. I'm happy that my career started really gently, and it's just, I get called by orchestras, and I say to my agent, why don't they ask someone else? He says, don't say that, Martyn, you know. But I'm just very lucky. I'm extremely lucky to be doing what I'm doing. It is probably the best job in the world.
You know, there was a very famous cricketer who once told me he was chosen for a test. And he went to the selectors and said, I'm not yet ready. I'll tell you when I am. Remarkable thing.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, you know, I know young conductors who now are not young, who had things given to them, put on their plate, and have not been able to sustain. And that's worse than the happy, slow burn that I'm managing to achieve. Actually, I'm 66, I realised, not 65. I was 66 last week, so I now get my pension in the UK. So maybe it's time to stop and let the younger generation take over.
Mr. Brabbins,
Yes.
what are the three most exciting things that you look forward to now you become the Chief Conductor of the SOI?
Good question.
Three most exciting things. Well, I guess the most exciting thing will be helping them, nurturing and working together and finding ways of improving together and making great music. That's a sort of general answer, but I guess that's what I most look forward to, because I mentioned earlier, once one has a relationship, a good, strong relationship that's grown over a period, then things work better. It would be great to do some recordings with the orchestra. We have some discussions next week about that. It would be wonderful to go on tour with them, as long as it's not to the US. I'd be happy. And just make great music. And you know, we're here in this fantastic NCPA. with this guy's vision coming to, you know, what he's achieved and is fantastic, but we want then to carry on at that achievement and keep growing. And I mean, Khushroo wants us to grow and flourish into the future, and that's exactly what we will do together. I think everybody has the same ambition. So yes, making great music. It'd be nice to bring some little bit more English music, perhaps, but we're planning, I hope, on doing. We're doing some Elgar next week, and I hope to do some more in the following seasons. Anybody else?
If we've got a great cellist, we should do the cello concerto.
We did it only a couple of years ago.
I have a question, Maestro. As a conductor, you had mentioned some time ago that when an orchestra, say like in the Malas, if something, you know, doesn't quite go as expected, have you first of all ever had such a situation? And if you did, as a conductor, how did you get them to recover? How do you handle it?
Of course, I've had little accidents along the way. Nothing, I mean, I was going to say nothing too. I've had a couple of major ones. I mean, this is slightly different to your question. I was conducting very soon after I started. I was conducting the Opera North Orchestra, with whom I'd won the competition. And we were doing the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto with a great Hungarian violinist who taught and played a lot of chamber music in England called George Pauk. And we got he wasn't playing very well, I have to say, in the first movement. We got to the end of the first movement, and he was perspiring, and he'd gone grey. So he stopped, said, "Maestro, I have to." He left the stage. So I said to the audience, "I'm really sorry. Mr. Pauk's not feeling well. I'll be back as soon as I can." But he was then taken to hospital. So we had 2 more movements of the Mendelssohn to do. Unfortunately, Marat wasn't there at the time. So this was extraordinary. The concertmaster of the orchestra stood up and played the last 2 movements. That was I've never had that happen anywhere, and that was quite something.
How did he play it?
He played brilliant. He'd done it very recently with an amateur orchestra, so he was quite. And then the other really terrible moment was I was conducting the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic, and a player in the wind section fainted. Fell. Instrument crash, bang. That was just so distressing to see that happen in live time. But of course we stopped and reconvened. But that's not quite what you're asking, I know, but just to elaborate on experiences. What a conductor needs, as amongst the many talents, or that's maybe the wrong word, skills one has to have, is very quick reactions. So if you sense something going adrift, you have to quickly work out how you're going to stop that drifting further. And that, if you haven't got that skill, then you will find things can easily fall apart. So one's senses have to be hyper alert all the time. And yeah, things happen. And somehow every situation is different. But you have to do this calculation that gives you a solution to bring things back onto the right track.
That's where your relationship with them really is important, because you have that, so they kind of probably would look at you to
just
give them back at that time, even though they don't know what they will face later.
They may not know what's happened,
They
need you, and they need to trust you. Trust is a huge important element of the relationship between conductor and orchestra.
So, Martyn, talking about trust, I remember, I think in 1990, one of the very early concerts together with the youth orchestra in Sheffield. And we'll continue this question. I remember when you tried to start the second movement of Tchaikovsky, they didn't start. You tried second time. they didn't start. I don't know what I never asked you what you felt when you tried to show it. There's no sound.
You know, I've completely forgotten that. And that's probably something that I don't want to ever have that ever happen again. And happily it hasn't happened. But it could happen. It could happen. I mean, there's a famous story. We had a great Wagnerian conductor in London called Reginald Goodall, who conducted The Ring, and he was famous for being very, very unclear. And I think it was the beginning of Tristan, which begins with this cello, do, dee, and he did his gesture, silence. He said, "Gentlemen, I've started." And they started playing. But yeah, I mean, it's something of a mystery what happens between orchestra and conductor. The one thing that is an essential that if you don't have and don't you employ is breath. Because every player, even of course wind and brass players, breathe before they play. String players don't have to, but I think just your humanity makes you do that. And if as a conductor you don't employ breath, then you're making your own and the musicians' lives so much harder than it need be.
Is it true now, Martyn, that opera houses, especially the more sophisticated ones, will not employ you unless, of course, you're a top singer, unless you look good and feel the part? Unlike the old ladies who said, if you have to sound like a grand piano, you must look like a grand piano. That was but now they have a lot of stress on how they appear, more on theatre rather than only vocal. Is that?
I mean, I never, when I was
Rita Hunter, for example.
Yes, I mean, but yeah, I mean, there are many, perhaps people that don't look exactly the part. But I remember when I was at English National Opera, we never discounted anyone for the way they looked. No, and I don't think one should necessarily. But then the audience, an audience very quickly kind of forgives, if that's the right word. You get involved in the characters, whatever they look like, I find.
Or
and you forget.
Demi Turner said, if she sounds good, close your eyes.
Yeah, there's always that. I mean, there's the famous, I don't know if it's come here, the War Horse, this amazing play at the National Theatre about the First World War, which has puppets, but they're handled by they're life-size puppets, a horse. But you see the handlers, you see the puppet handlers. You watch the horse.
Oh.
And I think that's one of the magics of theatre. That's we have to create illusions in the theatre because it's not real. I could say to be or not to be, but I'm not Hamlet.
Yeah.
But I could pretend. I could go on if you want.
Well, Martyn.
Any more questions? Have we bored you so much that you have to leave? I'm really sorry. That's probably time.
Well, it's an hour and a half.
An hour and a half. Yeah. I was contracted for 45 minutes.
Oh yes.
So you're gonna have.
Oh my God!
You're gonna have to double my fee. 00. Okay. What is 00?
Thank you ever so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Very nice.
Thank you, Martyn. Thank you.